Something's popping up. Hopefully it doesn't crash. Blue bar. Looking over here. Excellent connection. And we are live. Good morning, folks. Today is Tuesday, June 24th, 2025. I'm your host, rdizzle408, with my co-host, ML Shah. And this is America's Talk Show, the unaffiliated follow-up to Mark Halperin's Two-Way. So just jotting down some bullet points. I have my Mercury News here today for the commie rag updates. Trump ceasefire, Fed funding no longer for sex curriculums. I don't know if you guys got the update on that. Trump can now deport criminals to countries of non-origin. And here's a quote from Dan Turrentine. "We're insane," coming to immigration and defunding ICE. So a lot to talk about, folks. Who would like to begin? And did Joshua already have to go away for work? We already lost him. Dean from Ohio. How you doing, Dean?
Pretty good. I can't stay the entire time, but I was surprised that, well, surprised and not surprised. Surprised that we moved so quickly off of the Israel-Iran conflict, and not surprised because of this comment that I wrote in the chat in the main show. I got up this morning to see if pretty early, about 4 a.m. to find out if the ceasefire was holding. I'm on East Coast. And this was overheard from a CNN anchor. She said, critics are going to find it difficult not to call this a win for the president. And the framing of this is just, I shouldn't be surprised. And I guess they're looking for ways. If anybody has bowled in the past, bowling, the president has, he completed the 7-10 split. He took care, he got that. This couldn't not have gone better. And to hear the folks just trying to find the cloud to this silver lining was, as a supporter of the president, I shouldn't be surprised. So I did what Mark Halperin asks us to do and lean into curiosity when you hear other points of view. And over the weekend, if anyone attended one of the special episodes, they got to hear Emma from the group chat on Saturday and Nina from the group chat on Sunday, and just get a little bit more in-depth views on their opinions and their worldview. And I was interested. We talked about this a little bit last night. I don't know if Daryl's in the audience today or on the call, but we were talking about the fact that Nina, her worldview is what gives the United States the right to tell Iran what it should do. And it wasn't quite isolationist, but it was, taking a look at the world from eyes outside of the United States. And the question that I have, and anybody that's listened to this platform has heard Daryl, dare I say, eloquently explain his point of view and why we shouldn't be involved over there. So I am curious, just an open question. I'm not really asking anyone here. I'm wondering if this is enough is the coalition large enough of folks that don't want these foreign excursions to happen at all? Is that big enough to form a party? And are there, can that be the basis of the coalition of building a new party? Or are there other differences just too great that they just happen to align on this one particular issue? I'll just stew on that for a while.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Anyone with a direct response for Dean? Otherwise, we'll get to Wesley. All right, Wesley, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say during the two-way, there was discussion about the mayoral race in New York, and and you have an avowed open Marxist winning right now in the polling, and uh, just a general observation that because of our country's fiscal state, because we are borrowing to sustain all of our entitlement spending, consistently increasing our national debt, there is going to be increased pressure financially on more and more people. And the message from the AOC Bernie camp about open Marxism, open class warfare is resonating in the progressive wing of the Democrat Party. There's a lot of energy there, and I don't think that MAGA or um, I don't think the Republican Party should understate it. The Democrat Party might have a low approval rating with how they're handling Trump and things like this, but it's a potent, dangerous message. And I believe firmly that it's a message that can win in a general election. So
Wesley,
I'm,
can I push back on that? Just that particular point. So you believe this does not stay contained inside of New York City. You think this is a message that resonates throughout the U.S.
I'm saying
and you, yeah,
as things play out and our country's fiscal crisis gets worse and worse, more and more people are looking upward and saying, well, the message that the billionaires and the way that they always, tax breaks for the billionaires and the way that these things are casted is beginning to resonate with the independents and the middle class enough to where the the openly Marxist message now is a threat. Yes, it's enough to where it's got my attention. I'll say that. So
Peter? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
just that capitalism is the problem. People are being exploited. The middle class is being exploited, and these billionaires are keeping you from having your American dream is a potent message that Democrats are going to run on. It's going to be their main platform.
Yes, going for hearts versus minds. Peter?
Yeah, so what Wesley said, and I posted this in the chat, the writer Scott Greer he sort of coined this phenomenon. I mean, this has been going on for a while, but he gave it a term that I think is very accurate. He calls it American Chauvism. So I posted his article in the chat where he talks about that. How there is a danger of like this young populist branded socialism that first came up in the wake of the Bernie Sanders campaign, AOC, and all that, coming up in 2028 or beyond. I think the point he made about it recently, not in this article, but more recently, in the context of Mamdani coming up in the mayoral race, is that it's actually he actually said, like, in terms of Mamdani specifically, someone becoming a mayor is almost, from that camp, is actually almost better if you want to avoid something like that, because what we saw with the mayor of Chicago, right, who came in sort of running along I think he wrote that article in the context of the Chicago mayor first getting elected, Brandon Johnson. Seeing as that government is just since it doesn't work and it's just it's turned out to be disastrous in Chicago. I think the last poll I saw had Brandon Johnson's approval rating in the single digits. I don't want Mamdani to win because, I mean, New York is bad enough as it is, frankly, the city where I was born. It's really sad. And I have so much to say about that whole race in general. Just the fact that, I mean, if he wins, the Democratic moderates have a huge amount of blame to take themselves for this, for making Andrew Cuomo, of all people, Andrew Cuomo, the COVID criminal sex pest, is going to be like, is who you're going to unite around as your moderate standard bearer to keep the, DSA guy out. It's totally absurd. And I mean, I'm out of time, but I have a whole other thing about someone mentioned like the whole ranked choice voting thing, that it takes a week. It's ridiculous. Ranked choice voting should be banned everywhere that it's used. It's a joke. I mean, I've seen, compelling arguments that it's unconstitutional and it should not be. Like, our elections are a joke. Like, there are third world countries that have better elections than us.
So
So
Peter,
yeah.
Peter, can I respond real quick? Do you think that in 2020, remember when the Democrat primary got to South Carolina
Hmm.
and there was a ton of energy, and
Yeah,
he
I
basically
do.
supplanted, right? He was just set aside, and the DNC colluded against him. So he was ousted, but there was energy in the party, and there are enough progressives that it would be, there's enough progressives at least. I'm trying, I don't know how much energy there is, but it's substantial.
So I agree. Bernie definitely had the energy in 2020. I thought that Bernie was going to be the nominee in 2020 because of all that energy. And I think what happened was they were able to stave it off by uniting around, like, through the party bosses basically delivering South Carolina to Biden. I think also there was, like, the reason that they were able to do that is because there was still some skepticism of Bernie among older black voters. And, like, that's what gave Biden South Carolina. And then Biden was able to,
Right.
everyone else dropped out and united behind Biden.
Right.
And that was able to, take the momentum through. And I think why he was able to capitalize on that is because Biden could still present himself as he had the pitch that he was the only one who could beat Trump because, people supposedly had good memories of him from being Obama's VP and everything like that. I don't think, and this is why I think I feel confident again. I could be wrong again, but I feel like 2028, there's a even better chance of it being an AOC or someone along those lines, because I don't think that there's anyone in there, no one can play that Biden role. And Biden ended up having to govern a lot like Bernie or Elizabeth Warren would have. Like, a lot of their people got put into the administration. That was
Right.
kind of the deal that they got.
Right.
I don't know if there's I think the containment mechanism will fail in 2028.
I think it was a deal too. I think I think there was collusion there, and I think we'll put Biden in, but Elizabeth Warren will have a lot of sway. He he
Correct.
he governed as a progressive, major, in yeah, in a marked sense. Yep.
And I mean, I'm sure a product of that was, that his brain was turned into jello and, his advisors were running the show. But I mean, I think that they had that deal in place regardless.
Yep. I do too.
Good morning, Vincent. Welcome back.
Yeah, I was around on Sunday. So, or was it Saturday? We were we were we were myself and Aaron and Shaw were talking till 2 o'clock in the morning when Aaron shared with me the hierarchy of Iran. So he shared it yesterday too. I mentioned this yet in regard to I've lived in the New York metropolitan area my entire life. I'm 68. I'm a 9/11 first responder, decorated by Congress. And as you all know, I mentioned this to Erin and some of the other people. Uh, Andrew Cuomo is the most heavy-handed Machiavellian politician that ever existed, and many of the people, our colleagues, backed me up on that. So he, this the powers to be in New York, uh, you know, they're not going to elect a 33-year-old socialist who has promised free groceries. I don't know if all of you know this, but the man that owns the majority of the grocery stores in New York, who owns the DiAgostino grocery stores, is on the radio every single day and on TV every single day in the New York metropolitan area, saying that if the socialist is elected, he will close all the grocery stores. And he's not kidding. He's one of these, you know, entrepreneurs that is old school. So the big thing that happened last week is Bloomberg, who has a hatred of Cuomo, endorsed Cuomo, and there's a super PAC that Bloomberg put money into. So even if Cuomo doesn't, you know, the general election will be fierce. I was mentioning this to people. I mean, the general election will be Cuomo versus the communist. That's just a simple fact. And Cuomo's people will go and use the super PAC to go into the Jewish community to tell everyone that the socialist is anti-Semitic, which he is anti-Semitic. I mean, he is. And, it's going to be fierce. And don't ever underestimate Cuomo's ability to go negative. He's had a history of it. And I was talking about it, and Aaron said, yeah, Vince is right about that. So don't, everybody's talking about, uh, what's happened, and he's running a poor campaign. Nah, anyway, I mean, I watched the debates on TV, and he is what he is, and the powers to be are not going to let this guy that's 33 years old who's never managed anything to be the mayor. No, not going to happen.
Peter?
Well, and I totally I totally agree that there will be the business people in New York City will do everything that they're saying they're going to do if Mamdani were to win. My quest what and this is more not like a prediction, it's more just sort of thinking out loud. I mean, if you get into a general election where Cuomo is on there, Mamdani is there,
Adams.
Adams, does the Republican actually have a chance with
So just so
30
you
odd
all
percent
know,
of the
the
vote?
Republican is Curtis Sliwa.
Yeah, I don't know much about him.
Okay, well, you can Google him. He started after in the 70s when we had all the crime and all the problems. He started a group of people that would started patrolling the subways, and he's been around for 45 years, since 1979. So he's been on the radio, on WABC AM for years and years and years, and uh, he's been around forever, and he's kind of like a cartoon character now. I mean, so he's my age, and he's still walking around with the red beret and the whole thing, and with the group of people, So, he's not considered like a legitimate candidate. He's a candidate of all the angry vigilantes, and no, but that's how he got his start. Like, there was a movie called Death Wish with Charles Bronson, and it showed how bad the crime was in New York City. And in New York City in the mid 70s, late 70s, if you went into in 1977, if you went into Times Square, right? I'm a college kid. You walk into Times Square, the first thing somebody walks up to you and says, "You want a dime bag? You want a
Oh
nickel
yeah, no,
bag?
my parents lived
You want
in
some blow? You want some blow? Do you want? Hey, we want heroin?" So the drug dealers are just openly walking up to you and dealing. It was a cesspool, and
my
then
parents
like.
lived in New York in the 80s. So yeah, my mom told me a story of her first apartment building with it, and my grandfather went and saw her building to check it out, and he realized that that there was a restaurant in the building that was like a mob restaurant, but he was like, "Oh, this is a good thing because the mob's there. Then there won't there won't be mugged. You won't get mugged because it's a mob build in your building. You won't
That's
get like robbed in your
exactly
buildings. It's a mob building."
right, right. And if you watch the movie Goodfellas, in the beginning of the movie, the voiceover of Henry Hill says what most people don't understand about the mob was they were there to provide protection to the community. And
Right.
they did. I mean, somebody like John Gotti would have a 4th of July parade. John Gotti's neighborhood was very safe. I mean,
Well,
That's
Vincent,
right.
we have a question about super delegates because the claim is also made that super delegates keep the party safe. So what do you think about the super delegate system?
oh, you're talking about the Democratic Party?
Yes, Vincent.
Oh, well, the super delegates are the ones that got Hillary Clinton elected as the candidate in 20 in 2016. As you know, she only beat Sanders by 100 delegates, and that race went right to June 1st. I mean, it was the longest primary race we've had in recent history. So all the super delegates, obviously, look, it's an old story. Patronage, like, of course you're going to support Hillary Clinton because President Clinton had raised hundreds of billions of dollars for a candidate. So the way it works is that the Democrats and the Republicans have an annual event in a state. So then they go and get someone to come raise all the money. Well, Bill Clinton had been doing that since he was elected governor of Arkansas in 1978. He would go everywhere. So then the super delegates are all part of that. So then Clinton gets on the phone and says, "Hey, your group of people are all voting for Hillary, right?" And yeah. I mean, do you understand how powerful Bill Clinton is when when um when who Kristen Gillibrand. How did Kristen Gillibrand get to be senator? Does anybody on the call know?
Let's
Well,
ask. Peter.
no. So Kristen Gillibrand was in Congress for 2 years,
One term, yeah. She was
one
elected in
term.
'06,
So
yeah.
how did she get? So who did she work for? She worked for the Boyce law firm. Whose law firm? That's Bill Clinton's law firm. Okay, Boyce is a billionaire. I've met
David
Boyce.
Boies.
Yeah, okay. So she worked for David Boyce and she worked on the 92 campaign. So when the blind governor, I know this sounds insane, Patterson, the blind governor who admitted to cocaine use and an affair and giving a woman that he had an affair with a $200,000 job, he had to appoint a senator.
And people originally thought it was going to be Caroline Kennedy,
Well,
remember?
no, he said it was going to be Caroline Kennedy. So what do you think happened? Bill
Yes.
Clinton picked up the phone and called Patterson and said, "No, no, Governor Patterson, that's our seat." And Bill Clinton hated Caroline Kennedy because the Kennedys endorsed Obama when she ran against Obama.
That's right. That's right.
So, like, I try to explain it to everybody on the call. There's people that work for these people that keep Excel spreadsheets of all the people that they've had a problem with. And then they call people like me in and say, "Give me the list." And then guys like me who have a good memory say, "Do you remember this?" And then they say, "Thanks." So the operations research on both sides is so extensive, and it's just one fight after grudge after another. And that's how Christian Gilligan ran. So he called up Hillary. Kennedy's name was floated for 24 hours, and Bill Clinton called him and said, "That's not what you're going to do, sir. Goodbye. You're going to appoint Christian Gillibrand." That's how it works. you know.
Yeah, I do think
He's a lot
though.
more powerful than people realize.
I
Go
do
ahead,
think
Hannah.
though by 20 that he has become somewhat diminished.
Yes.
And what I would say to that, like, so in 2016, it was written a number of books that now part of that was due to Hillary not taking his advice, and he complained a lot about that Hillary and her people and in 2008 too, to a certain extent. Like Halperin wrote about that in his book.
Right.
Again, especially in 2016, Hillary and her people, like she wanted to be like, I don't need Bill to win the presidency, when in actual fact, Hillary Clinton is a terrible politician who would never have gotten elected to anything without Bill. Um, so, and I
Yeah,
think
no,
that
like you're right. Because when she ran in 2000, it was
well,
Bill who
she
was
was
running the.
coronated.
Yeah, so it was Bill who was running the campaign when he ran, and when she ran in 2000, and he would campaign with her in Harlem. I'm not exaggerating. 100,000 people would show up.
And
Okay,
of course, there was a certain Kennedy who was also going to run for that seat who died in a plane crash.
right. So always remember, before Obama got elected, a lot of people in the black community used to say that Bill Clinton was the first
That's right.
African American president. No, they used to say that, and
No,
I've
it's true. They
discussed
did say
it.
that.
Yeah, they used to say that, and like I said, when then he told her what to do, and she debated with this guy Rick Lazio, and this Rick Lazio was ahead in the polls because she was cast as a carpetbagger, and of course Bill Clinton would go on TV and say, Bobby Kennedy was elected from here. He's not from New York. How come no one said he was a carpetbagger? My wife's not a carpetbagger. So he was so influential in the campaign. And then she debated Lazio, and he practiced. He had all his people coach her for the debate. She's in a debate with this guy Lazio. She kept baiting Lazio. Lazio left the podium and got near her, and that was the end of Lazio. I know Republicans that wouldn't even donate money to Lazio because he got like in her face, and she goes, "Please move back. You're in my space." And that was all choreographed by Bill Clinton. He's the master.
I do think
No,
the
but
big
you're
part
right.
of
He's diminished.
2016
He's
with the
diminished because he's had 2 heart attacks. Like, look
yep.
at me. Like, look how I talk. Bill Clinton used to talk like that. I used to see him at conferences. He used to talk like this. Most politicians, they learn to talk like they yell when they talk. Bill Clinton now, after 2 heart attacks, he talks like this. He talks like an old man. He talks. I look at what's happened in Iran, and he talks like this, and he sounds like he's taking breath. He sounds really old. He didn't.
He
Let's
looks really old. He looks like a zombie, frankly. He's looked like a
Two heart
zombie for the last
attacks.
10 years. His
Dean.
Right.
face was all shriveled up and everything. I do think that 2016, sort of the arrangement, the arrangement of Hillary, right? I think that was, that was, her people in the party, but also it was Obama. Like that they made they made a deal essentially that, because they were threatening to withhold their endorsement. And it is interesting, just as an aside to the whole first black president thing, people forget that throughout 2008 was the first presidential race I paid attention to. Throughout 2007, in all the polling, Hillary was actually ahead with black voters in the polls
Yes.
until Iowa, because black voters thought that Obama couldn't win, and some of them were like skeptical of him because he's not, he's black, but he's not African American in in the classical sense, right? He's like, is the recent African immigrant as opposed to a descendant of slaves. But when he won Iowa, and they were like, oh man, he won a 90% white state, he can actually win. Then they switched.
You realize before Iowa, in December and early January of '08, Hillary Clinton in the polls was beating him 56-30.
Yeah, by a lot.
No, it was like 2-1 almost.
All right,
Yeah,
guys. Let's.
Obama's.
I gotta.
Yeah. Sorry.
Get back to the queue here, Dean, please.
No, I'm loving this. I'm trying to figure out though, and as Vincent rightly reminded us, or is that Hillary Clinton was helped at the time to get the nomination from Bernie. I'm trying to figure out how strong is this progressive. Is it a wave? Is it a wing? Is it a? I mean, what is it? Wesley's got me all knotted up right now, thinking, is
Well,
this something under the
just look at the
yeah.
Stop the Oligarchy Tour website right now. And
Yeah, I
event
understand.
event. Right.
Yeah, I understand. I look at it this way, Wesley, or this is what I'm trying to compare it to. I was worried from my perspective about the never Trumpers that started to coalesce. And I thought, wow, will the Republicans be able to win with the number of never Trumpers that are coming together? And when that happened, I thought, oh, he won. They must not be that big. So now I'm using that as a block. I don't even know the size of that, but I'm using that as a block. Is the progressive wing of the Democratic Party analogous to those never Trumpers, or
I don't know.
Same size?
It all depends. I know I've talked too much, but it all depends what kind of. I live in Connecticut,
Yeah.
and Ned Lamont is a progressive. Ned Lamont is a socialist. Think about it. So he supported Bernie Sanders. So I live in a state. Ned Lamont is a progressive, and progressives are really big here. But the kind of progressives in Connecticut are not the same kind of progressives in New York City, okay? Because Ned Lamont is worth $700 million and lives in Greenwich. So he's that kind
He's
of
descended from a
progressive.
former head of JP Morgan. He's like
Right.
as blue
So
blood as you
so
get.
it was just released yesterday that he's worth 700 million, him and his wife. He's from Greenwich. He's not new money. He's from like 10 generations of waspy money. And he's a progressive. And
Well,
his grandfather ran against
I'll just
um, yeah, so progressives in like rich progressives or Vermont progressives that are wealthy or Connecticut, Fairfield County progressives are much different than AOC, New York City
sure. But
progressives.
let me just
Well,
say this, and I'll just respond to Dean briefly. The There's a torch being passed from Bernie Sanders, who's going to be too old, right? There's a torch being passed from him to AOC. Like
Yes.
he is bringing her out, and now she does more to satisfy the progressive base nationally than Bernie Sanders does. She checks identity politic billets, right? She checks those boxes, as it were, and so there's like this, I don't know, everything kind of being merged into this candidate. And AOC is for sure running, right? She's going to run, and
Can't see it.
there's going to be energy. You can't see it. She's going to run. I think. And there's going
She
to be.
just doesn't seem to do very well. I take your point, Wesley.
She
She
will
just
run. I mean, we can agree with that. She's posturing herself for a presidential run, right?
oh
Did
man.
did you did you
Peter,
ever
Peter, hold
ask?
on. Oh, sorry.
I just want to ask some.
Okay.
Have you ever asked a Democrat so my congressman is Jim Himes. I'm good friends with him. He's given me awards and everything. I like him. And he's Democrat. And I said to him, "Can you explain to me the difference between a liberal Democrat and a progressive?" And it took him a long time to explain the difference because there's Democrats that are like, "I'm a liberal Democrat. I'm not a progressive. I'm a Democrat." I mean, I don't, a lot of, the rank and file people that are in like the Democratic Party, the majority of them are liberal Democrats. They are not progressives.
Right.
Anyone.
And I think it's tough to define what progressive is. Like how do you define that? Because it's more of just a contrarian group. Like we're against the system. We want to tear down the system. more than it is like, here's our ideology. But I think if you had to summarize it, and the reason that there's overlap is because of the rise of anti-capitalist Marxist thought that is affecting both liberals and progressives, right?
Yeah, and I just want to point out that Bolsheviks hijacked the term progressive from independent dairy cooperatives, right? And so it's just like, not state-run cooperatives, but pretty much what we're doing here. There's no government involved here, and we're all pretty much on the equal level when we're speaking, right? So I'm going to bring Peter in.
So,
sorry, Wesley, you had one more thing.
How would you define progressive? That like the modern progressive, like right now, as a wing of the Democrat Party, how would you define their ideology?
Funny, I just looked it up or did a quick chat on it.
Yeah.
GPT, focus on
I'm doing that too.
Yeah, progressives focus on systematic equalities, race, gender, class, and climate. Advocate for bold structural reforms. Think Green New Deal, Medicare for all. More critical.
But that sounds just like a liberal Democrat. That's a liberal Democrat.
I would trace it back.
Classic. Let me say this, just to contrast. Classic liberal Democrat, sometimes just called a liberal. Individual rights and liberties are foundational. Belief in regulated capitalism with a social safety net. This is what I remember. Government should correct market failures, but not overly control the economy. Think more incrementalists. Strong support for civil rights, voting rights, democratic institutions. So I think that's what I think of when Bill Maher gets on his soapbox about, the Democratic Party has left me. That's what I hear. That's that when he says he's a liberal, he's a classic liberal. That's what I'm looking for, and I'm hoping that's the base and the larger base of the Democratic Party that they'll eventually get back to.
Peter, would you like to take the floor here?
Yeah. So what I would say is I think ultimately what will be the communist state. Well, Ray, DSA, that's true. ML, I would say that the DSA's ideology ultimately comes back to a guy named Michael Harrington. Like Michael Harrington was the founder of DSA. I would have to refresh myself on, how his the sort of spin that he took on like traditional communism and whatnot. But what I would say is the Achilles heel of this sort of AOC Mamdani generation is that unlike Bernie Sanders in 2016, they don't actually have Bernie Sanders in 2016 had a real working class base of support across the country. I believe he would have won the general election in 2016. I don't know about 2020.
The nomination or win the whole thing?
If he had been the nominee in the general in 2016, I think he would have won. 2020, I'm not so sure. Because he had that real organic working class base of support. And a lot of those people, when Hillary was the nominee, they either voted for Trump or they didn't vote, or a few of them voted for Jill Stein. I think that you started to see the beginnings of this in 2020, that he moved away from that in favor of courting the kind of people who are now Mamdani's base of support in the New York City campaign, like affluent, urban, intellectual type, people in Brooklyn who are the inspiration for characters from like the Lena Dunham TV series Girls, like that kind of person.
Younger, you heard that woman from Brooklyn on the call.
Yeah.
No, nobody over 50
millennials
is voting for that guy.
Correct. And there's been polling that's shown that like Mamdani's supporter, I mean, sure, like the Michael Bloombergs and stuff, they don't want Mamdani, but among people making over $100,000 a year, Mamdani is winning by a lot in the last poll that I saw. So like the wealthiest business owners don't want Cuomo, but the people who are the young affluent Brooklyn types, that's the AOC Mamdani base of support.
Right.
So I don't think the working class in this race is not supporting him. In the primary, they're supporting Cuomo. We'll see what happens in the general election. But like urban affluent, like, trust fund socialists are the actual base of support for these people. Like there's no working class anywhere, not even white working class, just working class in general. There's no working class in the United States that's going to be thrilled about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez running for president in 2028. I mean, the only way that she would have a chance is that if, really, if we get into some kind of a real crazy war which thankfully it looks like we've averted, thank God. That's the only chance that she would have, is there's some kind of disastrous war or unforeseen black swan event that just totally tanks everything. Because other than that, I don't think she has a base of support outside of these affluent urban young people.
Did you hear Nina Turner on Two-Way the other day?
Which time? Which one?
Well, no, she was on the other day, and she was
Sunday night, the special episode.
Oh no, I didn't watch that one.
Okay, so she was running out the 50-year rhetoric that I've heard since Vietnam, since my days in ROTC. I had to listen to her talk about, instead of talking about foreign policy, she quickly shifted and started talking about slavery and pre-1968, and women couldn't get mortgages until the 60s, which has nothing to do with foreign affairs.
No,
and
I think that was the point.
She started in on all this domestic policy, and then her conclusion is the reason why radical Muslim terrorists hate the United States is because we created them to hate us. And I've been hearing that for 50 years. Okay. And it's like, enough of that. I mean, and I brought it up in the chat, and then, don't say that. But, it's like.
Here's one for you, Vincent. Who elected Mossadegh? They say Mossadegh was democratically elected. Who elected him?
Mohammed Mossadegh.
We hear about this in 1953 operation. Who elected Mossadegh?
Right.
Any clue? I mean, was it the people or the parliament?
I think it was the parliament, because he was the prime minister, right?
Correct. And the Shah was never out. The way it's talked about is the Shah was brought back. The Shah was always there, but so
yeah, the Mossadegh thing is a little more complex.
But Nina Turner and Jasmine Crockett and AOC, they keep telling people the reason why these people hate us is because we created them to hate us. Like they don't, and it's this. I've heard this for 50 years, and 19 murderers.
Hang tight, Vincent. I was trying to make a Shah reference to bring in ML Shah.
No. I want to get back. I want to talk about the Shah. That's another big misconception. You're right, because what happened. So, of course, we've heard for years. It's true that our CIA made sure the Shah came back into power as the head of the country.
Well, no, he was never out of power.
I know he was never out, but why did that happen?
No, but nothing. This is what I just looked up the other day. There was 10 prime ministers over the course of the time.
Right, but I'm going to also mention the reason British Petroleum and the Western oil companies had gotten cut out after World War II, and Aaron and I talked about this. It's a fact. And they nationalized the oil, and they kicked out the Western oil companies. So British Petroleum.
Hold on. They is Mossadegh, and so the monarch overruled him. It's again It's a total non.
But when they put when the Shah got back in power, the Western oil companies were all back in business.
This is the Muslim Brotherhood narrative that
I know, but I'm just saying. But the Western oil companies, led by British Petroleum, now known as BP, now we're back involved in profiting. The oil companies had been nationalized.
Well, okay, that is also where I would like to zoom into that. But ML, you've had your hand up for a while, very patiently, and please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say, generally speaking, this is not uniform in all places and times in the U.S., but for the most part, at a local level, this is been on my observation anyway, my neck of the woods, and some others that I've have friends with that we've talked like kind of like this for over the years. But there's a super hardcore progressive person on the ballot, and they're a woman, that's like a double thing. Like those, they're more likely to win, generally speaking. Now, obviously, what kind of woman, whatever. But like if there's a moderate, like a Cuomo, they generally do pretty good. If you're a conservative on any local level near a major metropolitan area, you're not going to do anything unless it's like specifically a known red area or a really purple area and you have that kind of thing. But I don't, who knows what's going to happen, but I can't help but think that like if Cuomo loses, I think the Democrats are going to have to really look internally and see what their firewalls will be for like an AOC, because like everybody else has said on here, all the progressives need is catch a little bit of energy and a fire. And this is about the time like where if the progressives win that, broadly speaking, under the umbrella of progressive hard left, DSA or otherwise or whatever, like that's going to give them fire and put a little energy in their little starch in their shorts so that they can walk around and then start their own momentum, their own wave. And that won't stop unless and until you have something else there. But it's not a good. The sad part is to MAGA and Trump winning and all that is the crushing of the Democrats. I mean, I hate to say that, but Democrats are a mess right now. And I know it's a completely different thing than New York City Democrats versus New York State Democrats versus like the bigger, wider Democrats. But I mean, I don't know. Like I would ask the people who are in New York, what is your gut instinct on who do you think will win? That's more importantly what I'm curious about, to include the people that live nearest New York City too, if we don't have enough people on.
You see that question. Look, if you're wealthy and live on Park Avenue, okay, that's radically different than somebody living in Queens near the airport, or somebody living. Okay, then you have rich people that live like in northern Bronx, and then you have and then you have the people in Staten Island. So the people in Staten Island are not voting for a communist. Trust me. That's like that's the ethnic, the Italians, the Jews, the Irish, Steven Seagal, that's where he's from. So you know that. So Staten Island, so you have four different, you have the different boroughs, and they're like I said, you don't know because the voter turnout's going to be low. So who knows? I mean, I it's there. I keep reading that did you ever notice that no one can pronounce his name, even Mark Halperin? Like everybody can't pronounce the guy's name. How do you say his name again? So I don't keep saying the socialist. What is his name? I shouldn't do that. How do you pronounce his name?
It's that
Mondami.
oh, okay. I thought it was going to be that commie socialist.
Well, no, I don't have Mark, and all the rest of the people can't even
This isn't
pronounce
that
his
hard
name.
to pronounce, honestly.
What?
Mamdani, isn't it Mamdani? It seems
Mamdani.
Is
fairly
that his
straightforward
first
to
name or
me.
last name?
His first name is
You're-
Zoran.
It's like Monday, Mon. Well, Mon. I don't know what is Mon. And then your favorite journalist, Don Lemon. Mon Don. But let's get
I
back
thought
to
his last name begins with a Z.
Vincent, we got some people in the queue. Let's just get back into it. Peter, you got your hand up there?
But I just wanted to say he
Okay.
allegedly has 30,000 people working for him. That's what they're saying. That's what they're
No surprise
reporting
there.
in the New York Times.
No surprise there.
Oh, I lost what I was going to say. Sorry, first to what ML was going to say, and then sort of circling back to what we were talking about with the Shah and Iran and things like that. So to what you're saying, ML, about where the Democratic Party is right now, I think the best historical analogy, especially if they make this turn, right, and go for, Mamdani, AOC, and this, on two-way they alluded to, what's her name? Kat Abu Ghazaleh. So that's a harder to pronounce name. Kat Abu Ghazaleh, who's the 26-year-old TikToker who's running for Congress in Illinois, who was on like CNN and basically said that very 80-20 side of the 80-20 stuff about illegal immigration. I think that the Democratic Party right now is in a place that's very comparable to what we saw with the Labour Party in the UK in the early 1980s when Margaret Thatcher first came to power, where they just went super hard to, and Thatcher was very divisive at first with a lot of the things that she was doing, but the Labour Party went very hard to the left in the subsequent elections in 1982. Like there were the coal strikes, and those were like the British coal unions at that time were led by a full Stalinist named Arthur Scargill.
And why was she elected in 1979?
79. Yeah, 79.
Yeah, why didn't you tell everybody why she was elected?
Well, I think it was a lot of it was because of Britain was in a terrible state economically.
Thank you.
They were having, there was blackouts. There had been labor unrest throughout the whole time. They had their credit rating massively downgraded. There was this sense of loss of prestige from the collapse of what was left of the British Empire in the decades previous. So, and then the Labour Party basically doubled down on going super far left. And then they they were out of power for 18 years, and it took Tony Blair for them to come back to power. But back to the point about the Shah in Iran, I'd have to go, I'll and Nina, has this view, right? This very, and it came up when, on the last episode of Group Chat, and what I would say to that is it was the idealist, sort of liberal idealist view of the world that Nina embodies. Jimmy Carter's administration was animated by that. Carter was, in some ways more of at least campaigned as a moderate, this, Southern moderate, but the people he put in his administration, were these, they had a Nina Turner-esque view of foreign policy. People what's her name? I forget her name, though. She was at the Department of State in charge of human rights. I forget her name. Or Andrew Young, who was the ambassador to the UN. And one of the things that they did in their foreign policy was they were we're making human rights this.
They were more into human
focus.
Rights than war, right?
And
right.
Thank goodness now the women in Iran have human rights. Thank goodness.
And because the Shah abused human rights, they basically did everything possible to undermine his government and lead to, and I don't think that the Shah had his own failures, right? He was not a perfect leader by any means. He made his own mistakes, but I do think that the revolution of 1979 would not have happened were it not for the Carter administration's deliberate undermining of the Shah's government.
I was 22 years old. I totally agree with you.
Oh yeah, $660
And we also
million
preferred Khomeini at first. We also were not opposed to Khomeini coming into power because a lot of the thinking was, well, at least he's not a communist, because Iran had a very strong
not
communist
until
movement.
November 10th, 1979.
Right. It was viewed, Khomeini was viewed as a potentially preferable alternative to keeping the communists out of power.
You mean another dude we could put on the payroll?
Andre.
Like Gaddafi. like all of them.
Hey, good to see you guys. Sorry, I was busy with interviews all morning. I keep hearing a repeated theme. I think Mark repeats this as well, or Sean likes to, but it's picked up in our meetings as well that, there is no Democratic Party. They don't have a message, yada, yada, yada. I think that a lot of us on this group and the ones who watch two-way gravitated toward it before the election because we didn't like being BS'd to by media about who's going to win, etc. I don't think it's positive to blindly, some of the people who get called on in Mark's show, to blindly say that Democrats have nothing going on, etc. We have to acknowledge the fact that there are races happening this year where Democrats are outpacing Republicans.
Yes.
Period.
No, and I not to interrupt you, but I've said this many times. What's happened is the blue states have gotten bluer. I'm trying to. I have to remind everyone, there is no person in the House of Representatives that's Republican in New England. All the blue states have gotten bluer. And you're right.
Okay, but Andre, you're making your point.
Yes, but also, a lot of these districts aren't necessarily blue. They're purple and somewhat red in some areas. Virginia is not necessarily a blue state.
Right.
But the policies of this administration have very much made a reaction where right now we're, at an average of 13 or 15%, Spanberger outpacing her Republican opponent in Virginia's race. The New Jersey race, as I mentioned,
Mikey Sherrill's going to win.
Sherrill also far outpacing. And we just need to acknowledge that, because that's going to be the dominant narrative. It shouldn't be that all of a sudden after November, we're like, oh, what a surprise. Now the Democrats are expected to win the midterms. All of this shifts from month to month. And for me, it's just like, I'm not a fan of being like, oh, the Democrats are done, blah, blah. Or on the other side, that the Republicans are done, after Trump loses.
Well, I want to give two Easter eggs for Vincent. Okay. One is that progressive, instead of saying, oh, liberal, who's progressive? Christ. Okay. Christ consciousness. All right. That's one Easter egg. The other is Thomas Jefferson. I know you guys think I take it way too far back, but these are great. Take what works and leave the rest. Okay. But the word of God, progressive revelation, parable of Joseph, growth decay cycles, getting away from the feels. Andre?
I'll just finish up to what Vincent was talking about in terms of who's voting, because I'm going to go out in this ridiculous heat and I'm going to stand on some corners. Then I'm going to hit some victory parties tonight to see how the city council is doing. And I mentioned before, I've been door knocking. And as Vincent says, it depends on whose door you knock, whether it's the, Park Avenue or Staten Island. But the people who vote are the NYCHA, the New York public housing people. They're a captive audience, and they have been visited tens of thousands of times by candidates. And if you knock on their door, they're saying what everybody else says. I'm worried about crime. I'm worried about my own safety. But it's more about local issues. Like, I'm worried about crime outside my building. I'm worried about my bus access outside my building. And frankly, it's going to be how many people get to knock on their doors, as opposed to whether they think that Cuomo did something during COVID, or, how they feel about socialism. If volunteers and candidates are knocking on your door, you're more likely to vote for them. So that's why the ground game advantage to Mamdani is really working out at this point.
Now, just remember, so Torres endorsed Cuomo very early on. So Torres has his own machine. So you don't hear much about Torres, but always remember, Torres has his own machine of supporters. So the Torres people are all voting for Cuomo. They're not voting.
Mamdani is not going to even come in like third in the Bronx.
Right.
He's got AOC's district maybe where he'll bump up a little, but it's very interesting. If you look at the early vote, Queens has barely voted. Queens has voted maybe like 70,000 votes, maybe. I think it was in the high 60s last time I checked when it closed on Sunday. So, and then it comes to day of voting, and obviously we're at 100+ degrees. So that's going to affect a lot of the older vote, which would go Cuomo's way.
I was going to ask who you thought that benefited.
Yeah, well, it usually benefits, day of voting actually benefits, or actually you'll see a higher increase in older people voting, because early voting is not all precincts. Day of voting, you'll have more precincts, which means it's closer to people's homes. It's closer to public housing where there are a lot of old people. It's closer to nursing homes where there are old people. Those open on today. So it'll be interesting what the actual turnout is today.
So getting back to what you're saying.
Vincent, sorry, just want to get back to Peter here.
It's interesting. Look, I think with regards to what Andre was saying, I do think that it's not as if, the Democratic Party is going to fade away into non-existence or anything like that, at least not at this time. I do think that they're in a position where, I think their worst case scenario in the 2026 midterms is probably just like losing a few seats here and there just because of gerrymandering and polarization and all those things. I do think, though, that it is overall accurate that they're in a bad position in terms of the popularity of their policies. And yes, they are winning in these special elections, which have the one thing that might save them is the fact that they are now the high propensity voter party. And that's a structural advantage. There's no question about that. That's the reason more than anything else, why they've done well in most of these special elections that have happened this year because of the low turnout. Virginia, I agree, Spanberger will likely win by a lot. New Jersey, I don't know if I would say far outpacing. I would say Sherrill is the favorite. The last poll I saw had her up by 3 points, which was the margin in 2021, Murphy versus Schiaparelli. I also thought it was interesting. Schiaparelli got the endorsement of one of the big unions in New Jersey, the Operating Engineers Union, I think it was, that backed Murphy last time, which I thought was interesting. And they've got a lot of money and people to knock on doors, which, as you said, is very important. So I would say that Sherrill is still the favorite, but I think it's going to be I think it's going to be a significantly closer election than Virginia. And the last poll I saw, had her by 3. So I think overall that will be the one to watch. Not, if Schiaparelli wins, it's a huge result. I think even if it's a closer race, then we'll see what that portends.
I just got to jump off for a bit. See you guys in a minute.
Oh, good luck.
All right, guys, I think it's a good place to take us out, and hang tight. Folks may chill with us.
Oh, no, it's already 11?
Sorry if we cut anyone off, but that's a wrap. Remember, you can catch us live Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern. It's your chance to join the conversation and have your voice heard. Just check the link in the description or visit americastalk.show. Together, through the free exchange of ideas, we can truly make America great again. Don't miss out. Tune in and be part of the dialogue.